Hi, this is Stacy Higginbotham with GigaOM, and I'm here with Jeff Burke, Director of Corporate Marketing at Calix, which makes equipment for delivering fiber. Actually, let's start this with Jeff. You tell us what you do.
Thank you, Stacy. Basically, what Calix is a company that makes access equipment for network operators, right? So ultimately, what we do is DSL, fiber, any sort of fiber access, and all the accoutrements from the central office to the home, business, or residence.
Okay, and today I wanted to talk to you because on Monday you guys issued a release that you guys are providing the equipment for CenturyLink, who wants to do fiber backhaul for some of the cell companies, correct?
Absolutely.
So tell me what kind of opportunity there is for companies like CenturyLink and companies like Calix with the whole super smartphone rush to super mobile broadband kind of thing happening.
Sure. Well, we've certainly seen a lot of activity in the space recently with failures for the most part of, for example, iPhone users to be able to get access to to their applications as frequently or as normally as possible. What we're actually providing here is the ability to have fiber backhaul enabling these cell towers. And we're using a particular technology called GPON in order to enable to do this. And for operators, it ends up being a pretty tremendous opportunity, mostly for a number of reasons. One is the ability to provide gigabit Ethernet speeds to these cell towers, right? Basically what a technology like GPON provides is the ability to have an evolutionary path from traditional T1 service today up to gigabit Ethernet speeds, right? And ultimately provide the bandwidth necessary to deliver a lot of those high-end applications that are required, right?
So now, is AT&T right now, and maybe not them specifically, but are carriers who have phones like the iPhones still using T1s for backhaul?
Yes, actually that's the predominant technology used today for the delivery of these applications. And so you can think about it in these terms, a T1 at 1.5 megabits per second compared to a gigabit per second or more of bandwidth that's enabled via a direct fiber connection to those cell towers ends up being an enormous difference in the amount of bandwidth that's available.
Okay, and what are some alternatives are there alternatives between a T1 and going direct to fiber?
Yes, there are. There are a number of different ways to approach this. Typically what we're seeing operators do is provide an evolutionary path from the T1 services they have operationalized today to gigabit Ethernet services in the future. Some different wireless operators have different models that they are more comfortable with, and in which they will ultimately keep things like potentially their voice on the T1s for a time being and move a lot of their data applications on the gigabit Ethernet. And some are moving entirely to gigabit Ethernet and doing things like pseudo-wire to emulate the T1s on a pure Ethernet connection to the subscriber.
Okay, and you had mentioned that AT&T, for example, is keeping their voice on T1 lines, and then eventually, and their data will go over fiber. And Verizon, you said, currently has an RFP out for some sort of mobile backhaul.
Well, let me describe what's going on right now. A lot of the major wireless operators are either in the process of issuing RFPs, have issued RFPs, or actually are open to open bids in getting fiber out to these cell towers for the very reasons we were talking about before. The ability for them to meet the demand both in terms of subscription and in terms of just overall bandwidth demand on those at those wireless towers today, right? Basically what someone like Verizon is doing is offering, for example, a 5-year contract to folks who bring fiber to their towers. The opportunity here for a service provider is to basically not only get fiber delivered to those towers as cost effectively as possible, but ultimately once they get fiber to those towers, they have the opportunity then to approach the other operators in that tower with fiber services as well, giving them potentially a pretty nice upside with regard to their current business model that they have related to those wireless operators.
So this is, I'm guessing, a big opportunity for some of the rural carriers out there, so like CenturyLink, maybe Frontier, I don't know, is that?
Absolutely. I think that we've done some calculations, and we believe that anywhere from the neighborhood of 70 to 100,000 cell towers that exist in the U.S. today are based within the footprint of these primarily rural carriers, right? And to that extent, it provides a tremendous opportunity for basically having upgrade potential as well as enhanced services ultimately for their customers in those areas.
Now, how does this work with Verizon? I know is offering or is providing fiber from its Fios networks for its cell towers. Now, obviously, that's not across the country, but these things would work in, or rural operators would work in conjunction with Verizon. They would work in other places.
Yeah, so the way this industry works basically is there's a set of companies that build cell towers, and they have very sophisticated algorithms for figuring out where those towers should ultimately go. When they finish building those towers, they recruit basically wireless operators to hang off those towers. Okay, the wireless operators themselves may not have their own incumbent wireline infrastructure to support the backhaul necessary to feed those towers, and that's where the rural service providers come in. They do have that rural footprint of fiber or just access in general to reach the towers themselves, and that's ultimately where the advantage for pulling fiber to these towers lies. It's a competitive environment to the extent that you get fiber to that tower first. You have the potential to win and lock in that business for a pretty significant period of time, and ultimately providing a value-added service not only to your community, but have an ongoing revenue stream that's generated from the wireless operator paying you for that bandwidth over the course of whatever the contract is.
Okay, so what you're saying is someone like, I'm trying to think of a tower provider.
There's American Tower,
Crown Castle. So these guys are basically saying, we're gonna, for an LTE build out, run their numbers, and then they say, boom, small town B, you're getting a tower at this intersection or this area. And then the Verizons and whatnot of the world, they say, okay, this is where it is, we have to put our stuff here. So whoever the network operator in that rural areas has the opportunity to build out the fiber?
Exactly. So
okay.
let me give you an example of how this works. There is an existing access network that already exists for most of these rural operators. And oftentimes it can be anywhere from a solid OC48 ring to maybe even a 10 gigabit Ethernet ring that sits out there and serves the community. Oftentimes that'll pass within anywhere from a few hundred yards to a few miles of a cell tower proposed location. Right. The question is, how do I get my connectivity from that point most cost effectively out to that cell tower? Right. And ultimately what happens is you start doing trade-offs with regard to the technology and the bandwidth that makes that most optimal for your particular scenario. In the case of a GPON, what basically happens is you can tap into that ring at any point and utilize passive electronics. So you don't need to drop power. All you're really doing is refracting light using mirrors, right, to basically send that fiber signal out to that tower and then drop an ONT at the tower itself to feed multiple operators that may exist in that tower. Other sort of options would actually then that didn't use a passive sort of technology would require the placement of probably a pad, a cabinet, a switch, right, that ultimately would require the feeding of entirely different technology, either copper or fiber, all the way out to that tower, and then more expensive end units.
So more equipment, more fiber, more power costs. Okay.
Exactly.
And
less bandwidth.
And less bandwidth. Okay. And generally, what is the cost of backhaul for a cellular operator?
That varies so much between areas. It's hard to really suggest exactly what that is, but it has a lot to do with your peering locations, how urban or rural an area is, and so I really can't give an exact number on that. What I can tell you is that for many of our service providers, both large and small, so from the CenturyLinks of the world to very, very rural providers, they have actually found this to be a very lucrative business and one that they're actually willing to invest in today.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Stacey.